I've reached an age where I can no longer pretend that the way things happened was accidental, or that I was carried along by forces outside my control. I saw what was happening early. I understood the shape of it. I recognized the compromises as they were being offered. And I accepted them anyway, one by one, because they made my life easier. I was in my early 50s when it began, though the groundwork had been laid years before that. By then, my life was stable in the way people mean when they talk about stability without enthusiasm. I owned my house outright. I had a pension coming later, modest but reliable. I worked part-time consulting, enough to keep my days structured and my accounts comfortably padded. I had been divorced for almost a decade, no children in the house, no urgent demands on my attention. My routines were simple and predictable, and I liked them that way. I woke up early, made the same breakfast, read the same news sources. I kept my house clean, but not obsessively so. I paid bills on time. I did my own taxes. I knew where every dollar went. There was no drama in my life, and I had cultivated that deliberately. Drama costs money, time, and energy, and at my age I valued all three. That is the context people miss when they hear the story later. They imagine chaos or desperation. It wasn't that. It was comfort. It was control. It was the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle your obligations without asking anyone for help. She came into that life gradually, not as a sudden disruption, but as a convenience that slowly became indispensable. I had known her casually through a friend for years. Not close, not intimate. She was younger than me by about 15 years, divorced herself with one adult son who lived in another state. She worked in property management, nothing high level, but she knew the business side of housing better than most people I knew. We'd talked at barbecues, holiday gatherings, the kind of conversations that don't carry weight. I knew she was practical. She knew I was stable. When she called me out of the blue to say she needed a place to stay temporarily, it didn't strike me as a risk. Temporary arrangements rarely do. She'd just ended a relationship, the apartment was in her ex's name, and she needed a few months to get back on her feet. She was clear about that. A few months. She'd pay rent. She'd stay out of my way. I remember thinking, very consciously, that this was an arrangement, not a favor. I wasn't rescuing her. I wasn't inviting chaos. I had a spare room. I had expenses that could be offset. I had no one else in the house. On paper, it made sense. The first compromise was letting her move in without a lease. I told myself it was unnecessary. We trusted each other. We were adults. A formal lease would only complicate things. That was the justification. The truth was that a lease would have forced me to define boundaries I didn't want to think about yet. It would have required conversations about timelines, rules, consequences. Avoiding those conversations felt easier. She moved in with 2 suitcases and a small set of kitchen items she insisted on bringing because she liked to cook her own meals. I showed her the spare room, the bathroom she'd primarily use, the garage space. We discussed money briefly. She'd pay a set amount each month, cash, utilities included. No receipts, no paperwork. That was the second compromise, though at the time I didn't frame it that way. Cash was simpler. It didn't need to be reported. It didn't tangle with my taxes. It kept things informal. Informality felt like flexibility, and flexibility felt like control. The first few weeks were exactly what I'd expected. She was polite, quiet, respectful of space. She cooked in the evenings, cleaned up after herself, kept her belongings contained. We exchanged brief updates about our days. Nothing personal, nothing emotional. But shared space has a way of eroding distance without announcing itself. I noticed her routines. She noticed mine. I learned which mornings she left early, which nights she came home late. She learned when I preferred the house quiet, when I worked from home, when I watched television in the evenings. We began adjusting around each other without discussing it. At some point, I realized she'd stopped talking about moving out. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't say she was staying. She simply stopped mentioning timelines. When I noticed that, I had a choice. I could ask, I could clarify, I could restate the original understanding. I didn't. The rent arrived on time. The house ran smoothly. I liked having someone else around in a practical sense. Someone else noticed when supplies ran low. Someone else signed for packages. Someone else was present in the house, which made it feel less empty without making demands on me. This is where the nature of the arrangement shifted, and I was fully aware of it. We were no longer two people sharing space temporarily. We were cohabiting. We didn't label it that way, but the label wasn't necessary. The reality asserted itself through routine. The third compromise was emotional proximity. It happened slowly. Shared meals turned into shared evenings. Casual comments turned into longer conversations. She'd tell me about her work frustrations. I'd talk about my consulting clients. We avoided anything that sounded like vulnerability at first, but over time that boundary softened. I knew better. I had been married long enough to recognize the early signs of entanglement. I recognized the comfort of being seen, of being relied upon in small ways. I recognized how easily convenience turns into attachment. I also recognized that I liked it. There was no sudden infidelity, no dramatic line crossed overnight. What happened instead was a series of small permissions we granted ourselves without acknowledging them as such. We watched movies together on the couch. We drank wine on weekends. We complained about other people in our lives in ways that assumed loyalty. When she had a bad day, I adjusted my evening to accommodate her mood. When I had a long week, she cooked meals that matched my preferences without being asked. Each of these things could be explained away individually. Together, they formed a pattern. At some point, she stopped paying rent in cash and started covering specific expenses instead. Groceries, utility bills, occasional home repairs she coordinated through her work contacts. We never recalculated the arrangement. We never wrote anything down. We both understood that money was still changing hands, but it was no longer a clean transaction. This was the fourth compromise: blurred financial boundaries. I told myself it was efficient. She had better rates through her network. She enjoyed managing those things. I didn't have to worry about them. The house benefited. I benefited. What I did not tell myself, but understood implicitly, was that this made her more embedded in my life, more invested, less temporary. And I allowed that because it made my life easier. The first time we slept together, it didn't feel like a decision so much as the absence of resistance. There was no confession of feelings, no promises. We both knew the situation was complicated. We both knew it wasn't ideal. Those phrases are powerful tools for avoiding responsibility. We did not talk about exclusivity. We did not talk about the future. We did not talk about what this meant for the living arrangement. We continued as before, just with an additional layer of intimacy that we pretended did not change the underlying structure. It did, of course. From that point on, silence became an active choice rather than a neutral one. Every day we didn't clarify the situation, We were reaffirming it. I was not unaware of the imbalance. The house was mine. The long-term security was mine. I had leverage, whether I chose to acknowledge it or not. She contributed, but she did not own. She benefited, but she depended. I could have corrected that. I could have insisted on formalizing things. I could have created clearer exit paths. I didn't, because leverage is only leverage if it remains implicit. Formal agreements redistribute power. Informality concentrates it. I didn't think of it in those terms at the time, but I understood the effect. There were moments when the arrangement would have sounded bad if described out loud. I recognized those moments clearly. When friends asked casually about my living situation, I was vague. When family visited, we adjusted our behavior subtly. I avoided introducing her in ways that implied permanence. Each avoidance was a choice. She began turning down opportunities that would have required her to move. I noticed that too. She didn't announce it, she simply framed them as impractical, too far, too disruptive, not worth the hassle. I did not challenge that framing. This is where the cost of choosing comfort over integrity begins to accumulate, quietly. Over time, resentment entered the house, not explosively, but as a background noise. Small irritations lingered longer. Unspoken expectations multiplied. We both felt constrained by a situation neither of us was willing to define. She wanted reassurance without asking for it. I wanted stability without commitment. These desires were incompatible, and we both knew it. I had opportunities to step away cleanly, moments where I could have said this had gone too far, that the arrangement needed to change. Each time, the immediate inconvenience loomed larger than the abstract ethical concern. Ending it would have meant disruption, awkward conversations, financial recalculations, loneliness, at least temporarily. I chose not to incur those costs. I justified that choice by telling myself she was an adult. She was benefiting too. She could leave if she wanted. All of that was technically true and morally insufficient. The infidelity, when it occurred, was almost incidental. I began seeing someone else casually, someone who did not live with me, someone with no expectations beyond the present. I did not disclose this. I did not feel compelled to. We had never defined exclusivity after all. This was the fifth compromise, and the one that finally stripped away any remaining illusions. I knew how this would look if discovered. I knew how it would feel to her. I also knew that disclosure would force a reckoning I was still avoiding. So I compartmentalized. I managed schedules. I maintained appearances. I told myself I was not lying, only omitting. She likely suspected. People usually do. But suspicion without confirmation allows everyone to continue as before. It preserves the silent agreement. The consequences did not arrive as confrontation. They arrived as erosion. The house felt heavier. Conversations grew shorter. The ease we once had was replaced by something cautious and brittle. We were both aware that something fundamental had shifted, but neither of us wanted to be the one to articulate it. Eventually, her contributions increased, while her sense of security diminished. She fixed things around the house. She managed more logistics. She acted as if investing more would stabilize the situation. I accepted that investment without offering anything in return. That is the part I find hardest to justify now. Not because I didn't see it, but because I did. When the arrangement finally ended, it did so quietly. No dramatic breakup, no shouting. She found another place through a work connection. She told me it made sense professionally. I nodded. I helped her move some furniture. We were polite. We were restrained. We were both exhausted. After she left, the house returned to its previous quiet. The routines simplified. The expenses shifted back. On the surface, my life resumed its earlier shape. But something had changed, and it wasn't just the absence of another person. I had lived for years in a state of deliberate moral ambiguity. I had benefited from it materially, emotionally, practically. And I had told myself that because there was no explicit cruelty, no dramatic harm, it was acceptable. Looking back, I don't frame myself as a villain. I didn't set out to exploit anyone. I also don't frame myself as a victim of circumstance. I participated. I chose convenience. I allowed leverage to remain unexamined because it served me. There is no redemption in that recognition. No lesson I'm offering. Just the acknowledgement that comfort has a cost. And sometimes the bill arrives not as punishment, but as a quiet awareness that you lived in a way you would not be proud to describe out loud. I carry that awareness now. It doesn't resolve anything. It doesn't undo what was done. It simply sits there, like an unpaid balance you can't dispute, only recognize as yours. If you made it this far, you're a legend. Leave a like and subscribe so I know you're one of the real ones. Thank you.